They thought they could erase me with a budget meeting. They thought I'd pack my things quietly and disappear into corporate oblivion. But what they didn't know was that their entire $96 million PR empire was built on the foundation I created. One signature, one command, and everything they bragged about to investors would turn to smoke. They took my name off the meeting invite at 8:30 a.m. By noon, their whole world would collapse. My name is Madison Clark, and for 7 years, I've been the invisible spine holding Vanguardist Media Group together. Operations Director, a title that sounds impressive until you realize it means you're responsible for everything and credited for nothing. That Monday morning started like any other. Boston's financial district was already buzzing when I arrived at 7:45 a.m. Coffee in one hand, laptop bag cutting into my shoulder. I checked my calendar the night before budget planning meeting at 9 a.m., the quarterly ritual where we'd fight over every dollar like wolves over scraps. But when I opened my laptop in my corner office, the meeting had vanished from my calendar. Not rescheduled, deleted. I refreshed the page 3 times, thinking it was a sync error. Then I noticed the meeting room booking Conference Room A. The glass-walled fishbowl where all major decisions happen still showed 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Budget planning session. Mandatory attendance list, 12 names. Mine wasn't there. 7 years. Not once had I missed a budget meeting. I was the one who prepared the preliminary reports, who knew which departments were hemorrhaging money, who could recite our vendor contracts from memory. And now, suddenly, I was ghost. The hallway felt longer than usual as I walked toward Conference Room A. Through the glass, I could see them gathering the usual suspects in their usual seats. But there was something different. Adrian Cole, our CEO, wasn't at the head of the table. He sat to the right, yielding the power position to someone else. Lydia Cole, his wife, the self-proclaimed PR revolutionary, who'd inserted herself into the company 6 months ago with a vague title of Strategic Communications Advisor. She wore a white blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her blonde hair pulled into that aggressive bun that screamed authority. I stood outside, watching her distribute thick presentation folders with her personal logo embossed on the cover. My replacement at the table, Kira something, fresh out of Syracuse with an Instagram following and zero understanding of our infrastructure, sat taking notes on a rose gold laptop. That's when Marcus from IT spotted me. We'd worked together on the server migration last year. Pulled 3 all-nighters straight. He couldn't meet my eyes as he hurried past, mumbling something about being late. The others noticed too. Jennifer from finance, who used to joke that I was the only one who understood her spreadsheets, suddenly found her phone fascinating. David from creative, whose department I'd saved from a 60% budget cut last quarter, developed an urgent need to refill his coffee. The shift was palpable, from respect to pity in the span of a weekend. Through the glass, I watched Lydia pull up a PowerPoint. Even from outside, I could read the title slide, Operational Streamlining Maximizing Efficiency Through Strategic Reallocation. Corporate speak for firing people and calling it innovation. She clicked to the next slide, a pie chart showing department budgets. Operations, my department, was highlighted in red, $12 million with a thick line through it. My phone buzzed, a text from Tom in accounting. "Did you know about this?" I didn't respond. I was too busy watching Lydia explain how the operations budget was bloated, how we needed to pivot to a more agile model. She used air quotes around necessary redundancies. Adrian nodded along like a bobblehead, his wedding ring catching the light as he gestured his approval. The real kicker came on slide 7. Proposed reallocation $12 million to Global Influencer Initiative. She clicked again. The next slide showed Fathom Creative Partners as the primary vendor. I knew that name. I'd flagged it 3 months ago when they'd appeared in our system without going through proper procurement. Fathom Creative Partners, registered in Delaware. CEO Bradley Morrison, who happened to be Lydia's cousin. My chest tightened, but not from surprise, from confirmation. The breadcrumbs had been there, the mysterious consultants appearing in meetings. The new efficiency protocols that bypassed my oversight. The way Adrian started copying Lydia on emails that had nothing to do with PR. They weren't just pushing me out. They were dismantling everything I'd built, piece by piece, to fund their nepotism project. I turned away from the glass wall before anyone could see what was written on my face. Not anger, not yet, just cold, calculating assessment. They thought they were playing chess, sacrificing a pawn. They didn't realize I wasn't a piece on the board. I was the one who'd built the damn board. Back in my office, I pulled up the vendor management system. Fathom Creative Partners had been bleeding us dry for months. $18 million in contracts, all approved by Lydia, all mysteriously exempt from our standard procurement process. The invoices were vague: strategic consultation, brand elevation services, influence mapping, corporate word salad that meant nothing and cost everything. I dug deeper: wire transfers to offshore accounts, expenses filed for client entertainment at resorts in Turks and Caicos. A paper trail so obvious it was insulting. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. The meeting broke at 10:30 a.m. I watched them file out, Lydia holding court in the hallway, gesturing dramatically about revolutionary paradigm shifts. Adrian hung on every word like she was dispensing prophecy instead of buzzword bingo. That's when she noticed me. Our eyes met across the corridor, and she smiled. Not friendly, victorious. "Madison," she called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm so sorry you couldn't join us. We had to limit attendance to essential personnel." Essential personnel. After 7 years of 16-hour days, of catching errors that would have cost us millions, of building the entire operational framework from scratch, I was non-essential. "Of course," I replied, matching her smile. "I understand completely." She tilted her head, studying me like a cat who'd expected the mouse to run. "Adrian and I were just discussing your department. Such dedicated work you've done. But times change, don't they? We need fresh perspectives. Digital natives who understand the new landscape." Digital natives. She meant Kira, who'd asked me last week what API stood for. "Absolutely," I said. "Evolution is crucial." Adrian finally spoke up, his voice carrying that false warmth of someone about to twist the knife. "We'll need you to transition your responsibilities to Kira over the next 2 weeks. She's eager to learn." 2 weeks? 7 years condensed into 2 weeks. "I'll make sure she has everything she needs," I promised. That afternoon, whispers followed me like shadows. The copy room conversations that stopped when I walked in. The Slack messages I wasn't supposed to see. Screenshots forwarded by the few allies I had left. "Madison's out. Lydia's cleaning house. Better update your LinkedIn." But the worst part came at 3:15 p.m. I was reviewing our Fortune 500 client contracts when I found it. A massive security vulnerability in our data management system. Client information credit cards, internal emails, strategic plans all exposed through a back-end door that Fathom Creative had installed for easier integration. I documented everything: screenshots, access logs, timestamp records. Then I walked back to conference room A, where Lydia was holding a follow-up with the leadership team. "We need to discuss something critical," I announced, not waiting for permission to enter. Lydia's jaw tightened. "We're in the middle of... Our Fortune 500 client data is exposed. Fathom Creative's integration created a vulnerability that could cost us every major contract we have." The room went silent. General Counsel straightened in his chair. "How exposed?" "Completely. Anyone with basic coding knowledge could access proprietary information for Microsoft, Amazon, Goldman Sachs." "That's enough," Lydia cut me off. "These scare tactics are exactly why we need fresh leadership. You're seeing problems where there aren't any." "I have documentation." "What you have," she said, standing now, "is anxiety about change. Adrian, I think Madison needs some time to process the transition. Perhaps she should start her handover immediately." Adrian nodded. "Madison, we appreciate your concern, but Lydia has assured me their security protocols are industry-leading." Industry-leading. I looked around the room. These people had trusted me to protect their interests for 7 years. Now they sat there, choosing willful blindness because it came wrapped in a white blazer and spoke in TED Talk soundbites. Of course, I said quietly. My mistake. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened my personal laptop, not the company one they monitored, the one I'd bought with my own money, registered to an LLC nobody knew about, Orion Gate LLC, established 3 years ago when I'd first started seeing the writing on the wall. I pulled up the contract from 2021, the one where I'd built our entire operational framework, buried in subsection 7, clause 3, a single paragraph that everyone had overlooked. They'd been so eager to get the system running, they'd signed without reading. The framework wasn't just built by me, it was licensed by me, through Orion Gate, and according to clause 7.3, any attempt to transfer operational control without proper authorization would trigger something called dormant compliance mode. They wanted to play games with millions of dollars and people's livelihoods. They wanted to bet the company's future on Instagram influencers and offshore accounts. Fine. But they'd forgotten the first rule of corporate warfare: never underestimate the person who built your weapons. The leadership retreat at Crystal Ridge Lake was Lydia's idea, a 3-day synergy session at a resort 2 hours north of Boston, where executives could reimagine the company's future while billing $400 a night to the company account. My invitation had mysteriously gotten lost. Technical glitch, HR claimed. But I still had to drive up Friday afternoon. Someone had conveniently forgotten to transfer security credentials for the presentation system, and Kira had already proven she couldn't tell a HDMI cable from a phone charger. They needed me, just not enough to include me. I arrived at 4:20 p.m., the October sun already sinking behind the mountains. The lodge was exactly what you'd expect rustic luxury, all exposed beams and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, the kind of place where deals were made over whiskey that cost more than most people's car payments. The valet didn't recognize me. Neither did the concierge. 7 years of company events, and I'd become invisible the moment my name left the guest list. I found the conference room, set up the equipment in 12 minutes flat. Kira watched from the corner, taking notes on her phone, probably for her Instagram story about executive life. She didn't offer to help, didn't ask questions, just watched and typed. You'll need to enter the security code every 30 minutes, I explained. Or the system locks. She nodded without looking up. Got it. Super easy. I left the code written on a post-it. She'd lose it within an hour. I guaranteed. The main lodge had a wraparound porch facing the lake. That's where I was heading when I heard them. Adrian and Lydia, standing by the boat dock, champagne flutes catching the last of the daylight. I stopped behind a cluster of pine trees, close enough to hear but hidden in the growing shadows. Worried about the board meeting next month, Adrian was saying. Stop worrying, Lydia laughed, that tinkling sound that probably worked on everyone else. Once we show them the influencer metrics, they'll forget all about operational efficiency. Nobody cares about back-end systems. They care about viral reach. Madison's report about the security vulnerability is irrelevant. She's panicking because she knows she's redundant. Honestly, Adrian, we should have done this months ago. They clinked glasses. The sound carried across the water like a bell. She's been here longer than me, Adrian said quietly. Exactly the problem, old guard, stuck in traditional thinking. Kira understands the modern landscape. She has 70,000 followers. She's 23. She's hungry, malleable. She'll do what she's told without questioning every decision. Lydia moved closer to him. Besides, Madison costs us 4 times what Kira will. That's almost $500,000 we can redirect to Fathom. $500,000. That's what 7 years of devotion was worth. A line item to be optimized. You're right, Adrian agreed. She's become a liability. Too much institutional knowledge. Makes her dangerous. Dangerous. He had no idea. By Monday, she'll be gone, Lydia promised. Kira takes over. We implement the new structure, and by year-end, we'll have revolutionized the entire industry. They turned to walk back to the lodge. I pressed against the tree bark, breathing in pine and lake water and the sharp edge of betrayal. Oh, Lydia added, her voice carrying on the wind. Did you see her face when I called her non-essential? I thought she might cry. Adrian laughed, actually laughed. She just stood there, like a ghost. That's what she is, a ghost of the old company. Time to exorcise her. They disappeared into the lodge, their laughter trailing behind them like smoke. I stood in the darkness for a long time, watching the lake turn black, the lights from the lodge reflecting on the water like scattered coins. Inside, I could see them through the windows. The leadership team gathered around the fireplace, Lydia holding court, Kira taking selfies with the executives who used to respect me. The wind picked up, cold and sharp. I pulled out my phone, opened my encrypted folder. Every contract, every email, every piece of evidence I'd collected over 3 years. But most importantly, the original framework agreement. The one that made me not just the architect, but the owner of the system they'd built their empire on. Institutional knowledge, that's what Adrian called it, like it was a disease to be cured. But institutional knowledge meant I knew where every body was buried, every shortcut they'd taken, every corner they'd cut, every dependency they'd ignored because I'd always been there to fix it. The security system locked at 6:30 p.m., exactly when I'd predicted. I watched through the window as Kira frantically searched for the post-it, as the presentation crashed, as Lydia's face went from confident to furious in 3 seconds flat. I could have gone in, could have fixed it, could have saved them one more time. Instead, I got in my car and drove back to Boston in the dark, NPR playing softly while I planned the end of their world. They called me a ghost. They were about to learn that some ghosts don't just haunt. They take revenge. Saturday morning, 3:45 a.m. While Boston slept, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by legal documents. My laptop screen the only light in the apartment. Coffee number 4 had gone cold, but I didn't care. I'd found what I was looking for. The 2021 vendor contract for Orion Gate LLC, my company, though nobody at Vanguardist knew that. When I'd built the operational framework, I'd done it as an independent contractor through Orion Gate, then transitioned to full-time employee. Everyone assumed the company had absorbed the framework rights. They assumed wrong. Page 47, subsection 7, clause 3. I'd written it myself, buried it deep enough that legal's cursory review would miss it, but binding enough to hold up in court. Operational continuity rights. The licensed framework remains property of Orion Gate LLC. Any unauthorized transfer of operational control, defined as removal of the original architect from system oversight without documented transition protocol, will trigger dormant compliance mode. System functionality will cease until proper authorization is restored. In layman's terms, fire me without proper handover, and everything stops working. But the beautiful part wasn't the clause itself. It was how I'd built the system. Every API call, every data pipeline, every automated process ran through a verification protocol that checked for valid licensing. The license was renewed automatically every quarter by me, through a back-end process nobody else knew existed. They'd gotten comfortable. 7 years of seamless operation made them forget that someone had to wind the clock. I pulled up the framework architecture. Thousands of lines of code I knew better than my own reflection. There it was, the authentication module. A few keystrokes and I could change the renewal date, make it manual instead of automatic, require biometric confirmation that only I could provide. But that would be too obvious, too aggressive. They'd know it was sabotage. Instead, I did something elegant. I added a single line of code to the validation process. If the system detected a change in operational control without proper documentation, exactly what would happen when they officially transferred my responsibilities to Kira on Monday, it would initiate a security audit. Standard procedure, really. Except this audit would require license verification. And license verification would fail, because Orion Gate LLC would be listed as inactive. I logged into Delaware's business registry, Orion Gate's status active. A few clicks, a simple administrative update to pending review, something that happened to thousands of LLCs during routine compliance checks. Nothing suspicious, just bureaucracy. The system would check the registry, find the pending status, and pause all operations until resolved. Not a hack, not sabotage, just the framework working exactly as designed, following security protocols I'd implemented 3 years ago and they'd approved without reading. Sunday evening, I prepared my resignation letter, brief, professional, effective immediately, personal reasons, no mention of Lydia, Adrian, or the systematic dismantling of my department, just gratitude for the opportunity and best wishes for future success. I also prepared a second document, a transition plan for Kira, 12 pages of instructions on how to maintain the operational framework, every step meticulously detailed, except for one small omission, the quarterly license renewal process. That wasn't part of operations. After all, that was vendor management, different department, not my responsibility to document. The irony was perfect. I was giving them exactly what they'd asked for, a complete handover of my operational duties. Nothing more, nothing less. Monday morning arrived gray and rainy. I walked into the office at 7 a.m., 2 hours before the meeting where they'd officially announce my resignation. My desk was already being measured by facilities. Someone had removed my nameplate from the door. I found Kira in the break room, practicing her presentation for the board. "Madison?" She seemed genuinely surprised. "I thought you weren't coming in today." "Just tying up loose ends. Here's your transition document." I handed her the folder. "Everything you need to know about operations." She flipped through it, eyes glazing over at the technical specifications. "This is comprehensive." 7 years of knowledge, I said. "I'm sure you'll do great." Something in my tone must have registered because she looked up, uncertain for the first time. "Madison, I didn't ask for this. Lydia said you were ready to move on." "I am," I said, and meant it. "Just remember, when something goes wrong, and it will, check the documentation first. The answer is always in the documentation." She nodded, clutching the folder like a life preserver. I spent the next hour cleaning my office, packing 7 years into 3 boxes: the awards, the photos from company retreats when I was still invited, the coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Boss," a Secret Santa gift from my team before Lydia had scattered them to other departments. At 8:55 a.m., I sent my resignation email. At 9 a.m., I walked past Conference Room A where the Monday morning strategy meeting was starting. Lydia was at the whiteboard, drawing circles and arrows, building castles in the air. At 9:05 a.m., I handed my badge to security. At 9:10 a.m., I walked out of Vanguardist Media Group for the last time. At 9:15 a.m., sitting in my car in the parking garage, I opened my phone and changed Orion Gate LLC's registry status. The countdown had begun. The termination meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. I wasn't invited. Of course, you rarely are to your own execution, but Tom from accounting texted me updates from his cubicle near HR. "They're calling it a mutual separation. Lydia's already in your office. Jesus, Madison, she's throwing away your awards." I didn't respond. I was too busy at the Secretary of State website, filing the final paperwork for Orion Gate's status change, administrative dissolution pending review, estimated resolution time 30 to 45 business days. By 10:30 a.m., the email went out company-wide. Organizational restructuring, new digital-first approach, thank Madison for her years of service, Kira stepping into expanded role. My phone exploded with messages, former team members, vendors who'd become friends, even the security guard who'd taken my badge. But I didn't answer any of them. I was watching something else, the system logs. I still had access to through a vendor portal they'd forgotten to revoke. 10:47 a.m., first API authentication request. 10:47 a.m., license verification initiated. 10:48 a.m., registry check. Pending status detected. 10:48 a.m., dormant compliance mode query initialized. The beautiful thing about enterprise systems is their interconnectedness. One authentication failure doesn't just affect one process, it cascades, like dominoes arranged in a pattern only the architect understands. I'd added one more detail before leaving a pull request hidden in the development queue. scheduled to deploy at 11 a.m. Nothing malicious, just a routine security patch that would force all systems to re-authenticate, standard cybersecurity practice, the kind of thing I'd done 100 times before. Except this time, when everything tried to re-authenticate simultaneously, they'd all hit the same wall: Orion Gate LLC status pending. At 11:03 a.m., Tom texted again, "Something's wrong with the campaign dashboards." 11:05 a.m. Email system is lagging. 11:07 a.m. Lydia's screaming at it. I closed my laptop and walked to the coffee shop across the street from Vanguard's building. Through the window, I could see the lights on every floor, emergency meetings being called, people running between departments with printouts because the internal messaging system was down. Madison. I turned. Jennifer from finance stood behind me, laptop bag over her shoulder, looking guilty. "I was just getting coffee," she said weakly. Long morning. She glanced back at the building. Everything's falling apart. The moment you left, it's like the entire infrastructure just stopped. Lydia's saying it's a cyber attack. Is it? Jennifer studied me carefully. Is it? I stirred my coffee slowly. Did you know that when you build something from scratch, you understand every connection, every dependency, every weak point? It's like raising a child. You know exactly what will happen if you remove any single element. Madison. I left detailed documentation for Kira, 12 pages, everything she needs to run operations. But operations and ownership are different things. You can operate a car, but if you don't own it, if your lease expires. I shrugged. The car stops working. Jennifer's eyes widened. The framework? You own the framework? Orion Gate LLC owns the framework. Unfortunately, Orion Gate is under administrative review. Could take weeks to resolve. Very unfortunate timing. She sat down across from me, uninvited. They're going to lose millions. The Fortune 500 contracts have same-day delivery clauses. They should have thought of that before cutting my department's budget to fund Lydia's cousin's fake company. You knew about Fathom Creative. I know about all of it. The offshore accounts, the inflated invoices, the security vulnerabilities they ignored. I pulled out a USB drive, slid it across the table. Everything's on there, evidence even Lydia can't spin. Jennifer pocketed the drive. What do you want me to do with it? Whatever your conscience tells you. I'm just a ghost. Remember, ghosts can't make decisions for the living. My phone buzzed. An email from Vanguard's legal department. They'd discovered Clause 7.3. The message was full of legal threats, demands for immediate restoration, claims of corporate sabotage. I forwarded it to my lawyer, the one I'd retained 6 months ago when I'd seen this coming. She responded in 30 seconds. They signed the contract. Clause is valid. Enjoy your coffee. By 11:45 a.m., 3 news vans had pulled up outside Vanguard's building. Someone, definitely not me, had tipped them off about a major tech infrastructure failure at Boston's premier PR firm, the same firm that managed crisis communications for half the Fortune 500. The irony was delicious. At noon exactly, I stood up, left a 20 on the table, and walked out. Behind me, through the window, I could see people evacuating the building, not because of danger, but because without the framework, the keycards stopped working, the elevators went into manual mode, the phone system defaulted to emergency only. $96 million in PR machinery, grinding to a halt. All because they'd forgotten the most basic rule of construction: don't tear down the foundation while you're still living in the house. My phone rang. Adrian. I let it go to voicemail. The first cracks appeared within minutes of my departure. Campaign metrics froze mid-update. Real-time dashboards that executives refreshed obsessively showed nothing but spinning wheels. The morning's influencer posts scheduled, paid for, promised to clients, never deployed. Tom's texts came faster now. 12:07 p.m. Lydia just threw a laptop at the wall. 12 p.m. Microsoft's calling about their product launch. The press releases aren't going out. 12:15 p.m. CTO just used words I can't repeat. I sat in my apartment, watching through the vendor portal as error logs multiplied like cancer cells. Each system trying to authenticate, failing, trying again. The framework wasn't broken, it was working perfectly, doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect client data by shutting down when ownership couldn't be verified. The irony was exquisite. The security protocols I'd implemented to prevent exactly the kind of breach Fathom Creative had created were now the very thing destroying them. My phone vibrated continuously. Calls from numbers I recognized, numbers I didn't, blocked numbers. I let them all go to voicemail, creating a symphony of digital desperation. Then came the email from Lydia herself. No corporate letterhead, just her personal Gmail. "I know what you did. This is illegal. We'll sue you into oblivion." I responded with 2 words: prove it. Because that was the beauty of my design. I hadn't hacked anything, hadn't deleted anything, hadn't stolen anything. I'd simply allowed my business license to lapse into administrative review, something that happened to thousands of businesses every day. The fact that Vanguard's entire operation depended on that license, that was their oversight, not my sabotage. At 12:35 p.m., the emergency board meeting was called. Jennifer, still my ally on the inside, sent updates. Adrian's sweating through his shirt. 3 board members asking why nobody reviewed the vendor contracts. Someone just asked who approved $18 million to Fathom Creative without oversight. Lydia's trying to blame you. Board's not buying it. The watershed moment came at 12:42 p.m. Goldman Sachs, Vanguard's biggest client, called demanding to know why their earnings report embargo had been broken. Except it hadn't been broken, it simply hadn't been sent to any outlets because the distribution system was frozen. In the world of financial PR, missing an embargo was worse than breaking one. The CTO finally understood what was happening at 12:50 p.m. I know because he called me directly, bypassing legal, bypassing Adrian, desperation cracking his voice. "Madison, please, we need the license reactivated. I don't control the Delaware Secretary of State's review process." "Bullshit, you did this." "I resigned, with 2 weeks' notice, which you declined. I provided comprehensive documentation for my replacement. I fulfilled every obligation." The framework is owned by Orion Gate LLC, as clearly stated in the 2021 contract your legal team approved. Silence. Then, what do you want? Nothing. I already have everything I need. There has to be something. Actually, there is one thing. Check Lydia's Fathom Creative contracts. Really check them. Run them through forensic accounting. I think you'll find some interesting transactions. More silence. You knew? I know everything. Every ghost transaction, every inflated invoice, every kickback to her cousin. The FBI will be very interested in wire fraud crossing state lines. Jesus Christ, Madison. No, just someone who built your house and knows where all the bodies are buried in the foundation. I hung up. At 1:10 p.m., the local news ran their first segment. Technical meltdown at major PR firm. They'd gotten hold of employees evacuating the building, confused and angry, perfect fodder for the evening news. At 1:25 p.m., Kira called. She was crying. "Madison, I can't fix this. The documentation you gave me, there's something missing." "What's missing, Kira?" "I don't know. That's the problem. Everything looks right, but nothing works. It's like there's an invisible switch somewhere that got turned off." "Did you check the vendor management protocols?" "That's not in my department. Lydia says a lot of things. How many of them have been true?" Quiet sobbing. "This isn't what I wanted. I just wanted a job." "And you got one? Congratulations. You're the operations director of a $96 million disaster. Can you fix it?" "I don't work there anymore. Remember, I'm non-essential." She hung up on me. Fair enough. At 1:40 p.m., the framework attempted its final authentication cycle before full dormant compliance mode. Across every screen in the building, the same message appeared. License verification failed. System entering protected state. Contact Orion Gate LLC for reauthorization. Orion Gate LLC, a company with 1 employee, One owner. One person who understood the delicate architecture holding their empire together. Me. The best part. Even if they expedited the Delaware Review, even if they got Orion Gate reinstated tomorrow, the framework would require manual reauthorization, biometric confirmation from the registered owner, in person, with documentation proving legitimate transfer of control. They'd built their kingdom on my foundation, then tried to exile the architect. Now they were learning what happened when the foundation decided to stop holding weight. The war room at Vanguard must have looked like a disaster zone. I could picture it perfectly, pizza boxes stacking up, energy drinks scattered across the conference table, Lydia's perfect composure cracking like cheap foundation under hot lights. At 2 p.m., they brought in external consultants. McKinsey, according to Jennifer's intel, 3 senior partners billing $2,000 an hour to tell them what I could have explained in 5 minutes: you can't run a system you don't own. The consultants tried everything. Rollback attempts failed. The framework security wouldn't allow reversions without owner authorization. They tried to isolate critical systems, but I'd built everything to be interdependent, like a spider web. Touch one strand, and the whole structure vibrates. At 2:35 p.m., the first client lawsuit threat arrived. Amazon's PR team, furious about a product announcement that never launched, demanding answers. Their legal team didn't make threats. They made promises, and they had the resources to keep them. Adrian called again. This time I answered. Madison, his voice was hoarse. We need to talk. We're talking. In person, please. I'm no longer an employee. Adrian, any communication should go through my attorney. This isn't about legal. This is about... Christ, Madison. We're hemorrhaging clients. Goldman just pulled their entire account. Microsoft is threatening to sue for breach. The board is calling for my resignation. And Lydia's... Silence. Then, she's been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Investigation. We found the Fathom creative discrepancies, the ones you documented. $18 million. Madison. How long did you know? 6 months. Every flag I raised got buried. Every concern got dismissed. I was told I was being resistant to change. Why didn't you go to the board directly? I laughed. Actually laughed. With what authority I was non-essential. Remember, just a ghost haunting your modern digital paradise. We fucked up. No. Adrian, you chose. You chose Lydia's buzzwords over my expertise. You chose Instagram followers over institutional knowledge. You chose to gut my department to fund fraud. What do you want? Name it. Salary doubled. Equity C-suite position. I want you to understand something. Right now, at 2:47 p.m. on a Monday, your entire company is worth less than the coffee I'm drinking. Your PR machine is destroyed. Your reputation is in ruins. Your clients are gone. We can rebuild. With what? You can't even send an email. You can't access client files. You can't run a single campaign. The entire framework is in dormant compliance mode. There has to be a way. There is proper transfer of ownership documentation, signed transition protocols, biometric authorization from Orion Gates' registered owner, and a new licensing agreement. How much? For the licensing market rate for enterprise software managing $96 million in assets would be significant. Madison, please. Actually, I have a better idea. I don't want your money. I want the truth. Full disclosure to the board about Fathom Creative. Forensic audit made public. Lydia's termination with cause. No golden parachute. And Adrian. Yes. Your resignation. Effective immediately. The silence stretched like a taut wire. The board won't. The board will do exactly that when they realize the alternative is bankruptcy. You have until 3 p.m. to decide. That's 8 minutes. I hung up. At 2:55 p.m., my phone buzzed. Not a call, an email. From the chairman of Vanguard's board. Terms accepted. Documentation attached. I opened the attachments. Adrian's resignation letter, Lydia's termination notice, a full audit report acknowledging the fraud, and a new contract for Orion Gate LLC licensing terms. Transition protocol. Everything I'd asked for. At 2:59 p.m., I opened my laptop, logged into the Delaware Secretary of State website, changed Orion Gate's status from pending review to active. At 3 p.m. exactly, I initiated the reauthorization sequence, biometric scan, password, security key. One by one, systems across Vanguard started coming back online. Not all at once, I controlled the pace. Email first, so they could communicate, then internal messaging, then, slowly, the campaign management tools. But not everything. The influencer platform Lydia had built with her stolen millions that stayed dark. The Fathom creative integration permanently severed. By 3:30 p.m., Vanguard was limping back to life, wounded, scarred, but breathing. Jennifer texted me, "You did it. They're all gone. Adrian's packing his office. Lydia's been escorted out by security." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. At 4 p.m., I received a call from the board chairman. "Ms. Clark, we'd like to discuss your return to Vanguard as CEO." I looked out my apartment window at the city below, at the building where I'd spent 7 years building something they'd tried to destroy in a weekend. "No, thank you. I have other plans." "May I ask what those plans are?" "I'm starting my own firm, taking the Fortune 500 clients who've been calling me all afternoon, building something better." "You're taking our clients." "They're not your clients anymore. They're choosing to leave. I'm just giving them somewhere to go." Silence. Then, "Well played. Ms. Clark?" The coffee shop across from Vanguard became my temporary office that week. Every morning, I'd sit at the same corner table, laptop open, watching the building I'd once called home slowly empty. The moving trucks arrived Tuesday. The 4 lease signs went up Thursday. It's been 3 months now. Vanguard Media Group doesn't exist anymore. The bankruptcy filing made the Wall Street Journal's front page. From 96 million to zero, a case study in corporate hubris. They interviewed dozens of people. Everyone except me. I declined all requests. Ghosts don't give interviews. Adrian works for his brother-in-law's insurance company in Rhode Island now. Middle management. $60,000 a year. I heard he drives a Honda Accord. Brown, leased, no more Tesla. No more corner office overlooking the harbor. Lydia's facing federal charges for wire fraud. $18 million leaves a trail even the best lawyers can't erase. Her Instagram still shows her last post from that Monday morning, a motivational quote about disrupting the status quo. The comments section is a graveyard of schadenfreude. Kira went back to Syracuse to finish her degree. She sent me an email last week, thanking me for the lesson. She's studying back-end development now. She said, "Learning to build foundations, not just facades." And Me Clark Communications launched 6 weeks ago with 12 Fortune 500 clients and zero overhead, no office, no bureaucracy, no conferences at Crystal Ridge Lake, just me, my laptop, and the framework I built still humming along perfectly under proper ownership. We cleared $8 million in our first month. Some nights, I walk past Vanguard's old building. It's being converted into luxury condos now. The Vanguard Residences, they kept the name, probably because the sign was too expensive to replace. Through the empty windows, I can still see the conference room where they called me non-essential, where Lydia drew her circles and arrows, where they laughed about the ghosts they were exorcising. The thing about revenge is that people expect it to be loud, explosive, dramatic confrontations and grand gestures. But the best revenge is quiet. It's showing someone the Jenga tower they built, then removing the one piece they never thought mattered. It's letting them pull the trigger on the gun pointed at their own foot. It's giving them exactly what they asked for, then watching them realize it wasn't what they wanted. They wanted me gone. They got their wish. They just didn't realize that when you remove the foundation, the house doesn't stand for long. 11:59 and 50 seconds to noon, to be exact. Last week, I got a package, no return address. Inside was my old nameplate from the office door. Madison Clark, Operations Director. Someone had added an engraving below Essential Personnel. I keep it on my desk now, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. In every organization, there are people who do the real work, who build the real value, who keep the lights on while others take the credit. They're called non-essential right up until they're gone. Then suddenly, everyone understands what essential really means. My phone buzzes, another Fortune 500 company, asking about my services. The CEO mentions they heard about what happened at Vanguard. "We want to make sure our foundations are solid," he says. I smile, opening a new contract template. They will be, I guarantee it. Because I learned something important in those 7 years. You can build empires for other people, or you can build your own. You can be the ghost in someone else's machine, or you can be the architect of your own destiny. They tried to erase me with a budget meeting. Instead, I erased them with their own signature. And I did it all before lunch. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever been undervalued at work? Have you witnessed corporate karma in action? Let me know in the comments. Your stories inspire mine.